We are following that big news that broke over the weekend, the death of Cuba's Fidel Castro. Flags are flying at half-staff across Cuba as the island nation enters a week of memorials to mark Castro's passing. Castro, who had long been ill, died late Friday at the age of 90. A series of memorials have begun, with Cubans gathering in Havana's iconic Revolution Square. On Wednesday, Castro's ashes will be carried eastward across the country. It will be a three-day procession that follows in reverse the route taken by the then young revolutionary and his rebel fighters as they advanced on Havana from the Sierra Maestra Mountains before taking power in January 1959. Castro will be buried December 4th in the southeastern city of Santiago de Cuba. And while there is much focus on Castro's record in Cuba, the perspective is quite different in Africa, where Castro is considered a liberation icon. Tributes have been pouring in from around the continent. Castro sent thousands of Cuban troops to fight on Cold War battlefields in Angola, Mozambique and Ethiopia. He helped change the course of history in southern Africa, playing a critical role in helping struggle activists there break the back of the apartheid regime and forcing South Africa's white minority government to set Namibia free. Joining us via Skype to discuss Castro's legacy in Southern Africa is Professor Piero Gleeses. He teaches American foreign policy at Johns Hopkins University. Professor, hello, thank you very much for joining us. Here is this revolutionary from the Caribbean coming to the aid of Africans, sending troops and medical personnel. What was Castro's motivation for what he did in Africa, and what did he really accomplish?
Well, I think his motivation was summed up very well by Kissinger in the last volume of his memoirs, when he said that Castro was arguably the most genuine revolutionary leader then in power. He was talking about the Cuban intervention in Angola in 1975. What you had in Angola in 1975, the country was scheduled for independence in November 1975. A civil war began. On one side, the MPLA, which had close ties with communist countries. On the other, two other movements. Even US officials who distrusted the communist proclivities of the MPLA noted that it acknowledged that it was head and shoulders above the other two movements that were led by corrupt and unprincipled men. The MPLA was winning the civil war, and because of this, in October 1975, urged by the United States, South Africa invaded Angola with the idea of installing the other movements in power, which had pledged their friendship to Pretoria. And when the South African troops intervened, they crushed the resistance of the MPLA. And they would have taken Angola if Fidel Castro had not sent his soldiers. And the Cuban soldiers stopped the South African advance and then pushed them back towards Namibia, which was ruled by South Africa, south of Angola. And this was the first great contribution of Cuba to Southern Africa, a victory of what we could call, in terms of what was happening, the axis of evil. Washington, Pretoria, would have strengthened the grip of apartheid over the people of Southern Africa, because the South African would have installed the client regime in Luanda. And I think that was the reason why Fidel Castro intervened. The struggle against apartheid, what he called the most beautiful cause of mankind. And again, it is interesting that Kissinger himself came to this conclusion. This was the
Very briefly, Professor, on balance, do you think Castro's impact in Africa will be a footnote or really a major chapter in the way history remembers him over the years and generations? We have very little time left.
In the United States, will be a footnote because Americans like to distort history. In Africa, will be a huge chapter.
Professor Piero Gleeses from Johns Hopkins University, thank you very much for speaking to us about the legacy of Fidel Castro in Africa.